The Trans Am Championship, the oldest continuously running road racing series in North America. The men and women whose names live on in the record book of the Trans Am series are legend. Mark Donahue, Dan Gurney, Parnelli Jones, Peter Revson. The manufacturers have won renown for those marks which became the watchwords of the Trans Am Tour. The Ford Mustang, Chevy Camaro, AMC Javelin, Mercury Cougar.
It was the culmination of, controlled fury, it was just competition of the highest type.
Everybody knows on ovals, the NASCAR is extremely popular with the fans, and this was essentially the same thing on road circuits. And it had all the potential, and people that drove pony cars generally love driving. There is a sporty element to it, and they love racing. I mean, a lot of them did, so it was just a natural. I think it still is.
Originally billed as the Trans-American Sedan Championship, the Trans Am Series began inconspicuously on March 25th of 1966 at Sebring International Raceway as a supporting event to the famed 12 Hours of Sebring. The sanctioning body and series developer of the Trans Am, the Sports Car Club of America, had only since 1962 begun development of professional racing programs. The original rules package for Trans Am called for two classes: O2, the over 2-liter engine size class, and U2, under 2-liter division. The U2 class featured primarily European sports sedans, such as the Alfa Romeo 1600 GTA, Ford of Britain's Lotus Cortina, and the Austin Mini Cooper S, among others. In the O2 class were the automobiles that eventually would rule the Trans Am series during the early years. The big, powerful pony cars being built by Detroit's Big Three.
When all the American manufacturers began to put out the sport sedan type car, then of course it was just a natural to give them a good place to race.
We started off making this a program with strong manufacturer support, with rules that would still permit successful independent entries to run in it, and attracting big names, and this was certainly a goal, and to run at some of the tracks that we thought had the capability of developing into major tracks.
A.J. Foyt sat on the pole for the inaugural race in a Ford Mustang. Behind him was Jochen Rindt in an Alfa, and Bob Tullius in a Dodge Dart. 44 entrants started the first Trans-American Sedan Championship. The winner of the U2 division and the first driver across the line of either class in that very first Trans Am event would be Jochen Rindt. Bob Tullius, who finished second overall, goes into the record books as the first ever winner of the Trans Am O2 class. Points in the Trans Am Championship were awarded to the car make, not the driver. This made for a true manufacturer-based series which would eventually bring huge dollar commitments from Ford, Dodge, Chevrolet, and others.
You had a lot of different manufacturers. I mean, we had Chevrolet, we had Pontiac, we had Chrysler products, we had with Dodge and Plymouth, and we had Ford and Mercury. I mean, there was so many different brands that it created an added excitement, you know, because one of the things, you know, when everybody's racing the same thing, I mean, it's hard to be brand aware, you know, and with this, it created a lot of interest.
7 events were run during the first year, and the racing offered a remarkable mix of talent and competition. Ford would win the over 2-liter championship in 1966 by 7 points over Chrysler Plymouth. The under 2-liter category was won going away by Alfa Romeo, with both Horst Queck and Gaston Andre scoring 68 points. Although the U2 class shared much of the limelight with the bigger cars in '66, this would soon change. The O2 cars would soon become the trademark of the Trans Am series. The U2 class remained a separate championship that ran with the O2 cars until 1969, and then ran as a standalone series in 1970.
In 1967, the manufacturers began to realize how promising the pony car market really was in the United States, and the Trans Am series became the ideal showcase for cars such as the Mustang, the Camaro, and the Cougar. With dollars from Detroit beginning to be pumped into the series, the Trans Am suddenly became very important business.
1967 was a benchmark year for the Trans Am series. The number of events run in 1967 nearly doubled to a total of 12. Detroit's Big Three saw the opportunity to showcase their popular muscle cars and responded with dollars for car preparation and driver talent. Mercury came into 1967 with a three-car assault, with drivers Dan Gurney, Parnelli Jones, and Ed Leslie. The cars were prepared by longtime ace stock car builder Bud Moore. Chevrolet was not officially involved in the Trans Am, yet 4 Camaro Z28s were entered for 67. 2 of those were entered by a very young Roger Penske with driver Mark Donohue. Ford's involvement centered around Carroll Shelby and his preparation of the Mustang, which continued to be one of Ford's sales leaders. Winning the Trans Am became a Ford Motorsports priority. Ford's program was led by Jerry Titus. Doc Thompson was a regular for the season as well, while Milt Minter, Ronnie Bucknam, and Jim Adams drove occasionally. Chrysler added tentative support with 2 Chrysler products represented at the first race of 1967. Bob Tullius would take the season opener at Daytona. Jerry Titus won the second race of the year at Sebring, while at that same race, Janet Guthrie became the first of several women to eventually race in the Trans Am. David Pearson and Peter Revson took wins on the season in their Cougars. Lincoln Mercury also hired Cale and Leroy Yarborough for one-time appearances. The third event of the year would become the most closely contested finish in the history of the Trans Am. The battle would be between teammates Parnelli Jones and Dan Gurney. The winner by 3 feet was Gurney.
It was one of the most painful races I ever ran in. It was about 4.5 hours long, so a pretty doggone long time. It was 110 in the shade, and in my car particularly, it had 4 or 5 big holes in the firewall and enormous amounts of heat. I don't know if you've ever worked in front of a furnace, like a melting aluminum or something. Well, it was very similar to that. And I had done such work before, so I could withstand it pretty well. Everything was fine until 45 minutes before the race, when I ran out of water. We had a lot of water with us, and I drank and drank and drank and drank, and everything was fine. 45 minutes from the end, no water, and tremendous amounts of heat, and I was leading. So you can't stop, especially Parnelli, of course. He's the one guy you like to beat because it's not easy to do. Anyway, 3 feet was good enough, and it took me about 3 weeks to get over that. At least 3 weeks. I drank so much water you can't imagine. That was the most painful, without hitting anything, that I'd ever been in.
Surprisingly, the Green Valley win would be Gurney's only Trans Am victory. The SCCA record books still show the Gurney win as 3 feet, as timing and scoring was somewhat primitive in the early days. The 1967 Marlboro, Maryland event marked the first Trans Am win for 2 of the most historically important figures in the series, Mark Donohue and team owner Roger Penske.
Reflecting on Mark Donohue as a competitor, he was calculating, he knew when to run hard, he was consistent, he took good care of the equipment, and I think he brought a new type of driver into the marketplace, really. As you look at the Rick Mears, you look at some of the other drivers that have emerged over the last 10 or 15 years, they're more technical oriented, they run to finish, and today I think that's key. You know, as a friend, Mark was a personal friend of mine. He was dedicated to our race team. He was really the inspiration that got the whole Penske Racing organization together.
The manufacturer's title chase for the 67-02 division came down to the last race of the year at Kent in Washington State between Ford and Lincoln Mercury. Although they ran strong early, the Jones and Gurney Cougars would have mechanical troubles, and the second place earned by Ronnie Bucknam would give Ford the title for 67 by a scant 2 points. The U2 title went to Porsche, thanks in large part to the talents of Burt Everett.
In those early years, the goal was to win the manufacturer's championship. After all, there wasn't to be a driver's championship for several more years. Not surprisingly, the manufacturers were willing to pay top drivers to appear in the series to give their cars that extra advantage. The names of the drivers who've appeared in the Trans Am reads like a who's who of motorsports. And that trend continued in 1968, as we'll see in just a moment. Mark Donohue is to this day considered one of the great drivers of all time. He and his car owner Roger Penske always seemed to have an edge over their competitors. Mark was a tough man, though. He was one of the first drivers to work out regularly. He may have looked chubby, but physically, he was very, very fit. As Mark's teammate in 4 races of the 1968 season, I was able to see a much different side of him than the Mr. Nice Guy the press wrote about. Mark off the track was warm and cordial to the media and sponsors, but on the track, that was a different story. As his teammate, I got no help. The 1968 season would belong to Mark Donohue and to him alone.
Barely missing the title in 1967, Lincoln Mercury did not return in 1968. However, a new car appeared in the 68 series which would have quite an impact on the Trans Am, the red, white, and blue AMC Javelin. 1968 would be the year which would forever immortalize Mark Donohue's name in the Trans Am record books. At Sebring, Warbonnet, Lime Rock, Mid-Ohio, Bridgehampton, Meadowdale, Mont Tremblant, and Briar, Mark Donohue and the shining Sunoco Blue Penske-prepared Camaro dominated. Mustang pilots included Jerry Titus, Ronnie Bucknam, Peter Revson, Sam Posey, Bob Tullius, and Horst Queck in '68. Ford managed 3 wins, 2 with Titus, Daytona, and later in the season at Watkins Glen, and at Kent, where Horst Queck, in a rare 0-2 appearance, brought home the factory Mustang first. 1968 marked the entrance of the Pontiac Firebird into the Trans Am series. The Trans Am name, of course, originated in 1966, when the then SCCA Executive Director, John Bishop, had the foresight to copyright such names as the Can-Am and Trans Am. Other SCCA board members scoffed at this at the time, but were mighty grateful when the $5 royalty for every Pontiac Firebird Trans Am manufactured rolled into SCCA coffers. All in all, the Donohue-Penske 1968 Trans Am season remains the one most dominated by a single driver team in the history of the series. The 8 wins in a row are still the most for a single driver in one season. Donohue's wins propelled Chevrolet to the over 2-liter manufacturer's title with 90 points over Ford with 59 and AMC with 51. Overshadowed by the Donohue reign was the under 2-liter action. Porsche scored 90 points on the year to win the manufacturer's under 2 division, helped along with wins by Burt Everett, Tony Adamowicz, and Fred Baker.
In just a few moments, we'll take you back to the 1969 Trans Am racing season, and we'll take you up close and inside this superb '69 Shelby Mustang. The early Trans Am series was a veritable foundry for stories of men pushing themselves and their machines to incredible limits to win. Let me tell you a story of mine. It involves this car. It was in May 1969. Peter Revson, the regular driver of this car, had qualified for Indianapolis, and I was asked to substitute for him at the Lime Rock Trans Am. I got the pole, but on the last lap of warm-up, the seat broke, and I was forced to start the race with a spare seat that didn't fit me at all. I got an early lead and hung on to it as my back pain increased steadily to the point where I could barely even think straight. With 20 laps to go, Swede Savage was catching me, and I feared he would get by and win. Suddenly, he cut a tire and had to pit. Phew, I thought, I'm okay now. Then I lost a cylinder and had to nurse the car through 4 desperate laps before I won. When I went to get out of the car, I realized my legs were almost paralyzed. I couldn't walk. That was my toughest win, but it was not uncommon in those days for Trans Am wins to come at very high prices. As you can see, this 1969 car looks a lot more like the production version upon which it's based than does its 1995 counterpart. But I can assure you that these early Trans Am cars were pure racing machines. The lengths and expenditures that teams would go to in preparing the cars to win were enormous. Watch closely and you'll see this very car a few times as we look now at the Trans Am of 1969.
While 1968 was a game of musical chairs between drivers and teams, 1969 was the first season where solid alliances were struck and fans could count on seeing their favorite drivers inside their favorite cars. Parnelli Jones re-entered the Trans Am series with a strong Mustang effort from Bud Moore's shop. George Follmer teamed with Parnelli for the year, forming a formidable challenge to Donohue and Penske. 2 Carroll Shelby-prepared Mustangs were entered for Peter Revson and Horst Queck. Jerry Titus, now with his own team, ran Pontiac Firebirds for himself, Milt Minter, and Craig Fisher. AMC was back with the Javelins, and drivers John Martin and newcomer Ron Grable. The defending champion Penske Camaro team had a Z28 entered for Mark Donohue and a second car for Ron Bucknam. One of the biggest changes for 1969 was the departure of John Bishop as executive director of the SCCA. His leaving initiated numerous SCCA personnel changes. Nonetheless, for Trans Am racing fans, 1969 was far more exciting than the Donahue procession of the preceding year. The 69 title chase, awesome. The Detroit Elite put heavy pressure on the teams to deliver championship results.
69, 70, 71, we had basically 4 or 5 manufacturers competing. And at that time, they brought in the big guns, the hired guns, if you will. Parnelli, myself, Revson, Donahue, Jerry Titus, the list goes on, but these fellows were brought in to win. I mean, we were paid to win, and if we didn't win, it came down to us, well, why didn't you win? Well, if we didn't have a good excuse, we might not be driving next race. So you had to make every opportunity you could muster out of the race to try to get a good finishing or win. And at that time, it was pro racing. It was really the first, I think, the first real SCCA's effort in pro racing. They had the Can-Am and they'd had the USRC, but when the Trans Am really got going, we had Dodge and Plymouth, and Ford, and Chevrolet, and American Motors all competing with the slogan, you know, win on Sunday and sell on Monday. Well, it was the fact that the marketing put a lot of pressure on us.
The pressure often manifested itself in some of the most creative sportsmanship and ingenious stretching of the rules imaginable.
Well, a couple of things that I remember specifically. One was when we ran the vinyl top on the 68 or 69 Camaro, and people thought it was being used for aerodynamic benefits. It really was being used because we had dipped the car and the roof was so light you could see all the dents in it. So that was kind of a joke when they thought we were using it for aerodynamic purposes. Probably the other time, which was the most fun, was at San Javite when we were trying to fuel from a 30-foot fuel tank, and we set that up on a race morning, and people couldn't believe what we were doing because we could get the gravity of 30 feet in the air with our fuel tank, and that created quite a bit of excitement. So those things kind of were a laugh.
Parnelli Jones would take 2 wins for Ford early in the year. Ronnie Buckman would take 2 wins for Penske on the year as well. George Fulmer took his first ever Trans Am win at Bridgehampton. Not until mid-season would Mark Donahue log his first victory of the year. Once on track, Donahue won the next 4 in a row and 6 of the final 7 races. Donahue's Sears Point win would clinch the maker's title for Chevrolet. The 1969 under 2-liter division was totally dominated by Porsche. 11 wins and 81 points to Alfa's 28 points.
The pressure to win races would intensify even more for 1970. And as we'll see, this pressure forced some desperate and spectacular performances. The 1970 Trans Am season had it all. Major investments from Detroit's Big Three in American Motors, most of the great American drivers: Jones, Donahue, Gurney, Fulmer, Revson, Swede Savage, Jim Hall. I was there too, running a full season that year with Chrysler backing. 1970 was a classic.
Maker and team alignments changed for 1970, with Penske switching to the AMC Javelin car.
Up the hill. Feels good to get some fresh air. Just barely hit 7,500. On the brakes. Let's see if I can come out of here 7,200. 7,100. Not so good. Down the front straight. Motor seems to be a little lazy. It isn't revving up as fast.
In 1970, the American Motors program came about with my relationship with Bill McNeely, who at that point was head of marketing for American Motors. They thought that this would be a great way to show off their cars. We were looking for, as an opportunity to take the expertise, because we were not a factory team at that point with Chevrolet. And with American Motors willing to commit, it gave us the opportunity to grow our base. We brought in Don Cox, who was an engineer from Chevrolet. We were able to execute a new program and be successful. So it was one of the really the great experiences that I had, taking really a car that was an underdog and then making it into a winner.
Penske's driver lineup: Mark Donahue, of course, and Peter Revson. Chevrolet supported Jim Hall with a new model Camaro. Chrysler plunged into the Trans Am Series with 2 Plymouth Barracudas for Gurney and Savage, and a Dodge Challenger piloted by Sam Posey. Jerry Titus, still running his own team Firebirds, focused only on his own racing effort in 1970. Bud Moore fielded a strong 2-car effort for Parnelli Jones and George Follmer, despite Ford's cutting racing budgets by 3/4. Competition was intense, and the lengths the teams would go to get that extra advantage were remarkable.
I remember how the teams could outfox our technical inspectors almost every day of the week. Some of it would be as comical as the Dickens in retrospect. But the leader coming in, for example, for his last fuel stop, and the crew member dumping a 10-gallon can full of lead shot into the gasoline tank so the car would weigh enough at the end of the series. And shot bags found after the race, you know, or put in during the last pit stop and that kind of thing.
Jones and Follmer dominated the early part of the season. Early on, the Javelins had teething problems, but by mid-season, the renowned Penske preparation paid off. In fact, only 2 races on the entire year were not won by Bud Moore or Roger Penske-prepared machines. Milt Minter would take Donnybrook, and Vic Elford, driving for Jim Hall in the Camaro, would take Watkins Glen. Donahue would win at Bridgehampton, Road America, and Mont Tremblant. Tragedy struck at Road America as the Trans Am Series suffered its first major loss. During practice on Saturday morning, Jerry Titus crashed into the bridge abutment in Thunder Valley, suffering serious injury. One of the Trans Am's greatest drivers, Titus, died 17 days later. With a second place at Watkins Glen, Donahue would keep AMC's title hopes alive. It was not to be for AMC, however, as Ford clinched the title at Seattle. With Parnelli's first place and Follmer's 4th, the manufacturer's title went to Ford, its 3rd in the Trans Am. With the Trans Am manufacturer's title in the bag for Ford, the Trans Am Circus wound its way to the last event of the season at Riverside. The venerable Southern California road course would be the site of several most interesting stories.
Well, that race was very special to me, not because we won the championship. I mean, the championship for a driver didn't mean a great deal then. It was more of a manufacturer's championship than anything. But what made me feel so good about that particular race, I was the fastest qualifier, and I took off leading the race, and I built up a fair lead, and I started lapping the slower cars, and when I did, one of them run into the other one and knocked him sideways as I was going by, and the guy T-boned me, knocked me off the racetrack. I went down behind the crash wall in turn 9, way down there, tore my spoiler off. I turned around, I came back up out on the course, and I read something the other day where I dropped back to 9th, and the car was all caved in. The car wouldn't turn now, because it wanted to understeer because of the spoiler not being on the front. And it was the worst place. It was turn 2 at Riverside, and they had some curbing on the inside, and so I'd hit this curbing to try to get the car up on 2 wheels, to get the inside wheel off so it would turn. And I've literally seen pictures of the car going through this corner with the tires at least 2 or 3 feet off the ground. And I was doing that on purpose to make it turn, but anyway, I come back up and caught George Follmer was leading the race then, my teammate. And I had a real battle with him because I just couldn't quite get by him. Anyway, he finally missed a shift, and I got by him or something and won the race. And I've always thought, looking back at certain races and stuff, I've always felt that that's one of the best races, if I have to say that I drove.
Also on that sunny day in 1970, Dan Gurney announced his retirement from racing. In the nearly ignored under 2-liter division, the manufacturer's title went to Alfa Romeo, taking 8 wins on the season and 81 points. Alfa's wins came at the hands of 4 different drivers: Horst Queck, Bert Everett, Lee Midgley, and Gaston Andre. In a move that shocked the racing world, Ford in November 1970 announced a total withdrawal from motorsports. Chrysler followed. Dodge and Plymouth dropped their Trans Am efforts, having been less than successful in their only the previous year. Jim Hall focused his efforts elsewhere after his first full Trans Am season. Having relied almost exclusively on manufacturer support, the Trans Am Series was facing a major crisis.
Many things about the Trans Am were to change over the next decade, and when we return, we'll witness the near ruin of the series. The years 1971 to 1979 were not good ones for the SCCA's Trans Am series. Some of the greatest road racers of the era, drivers like Al Holbert, Bob Wallach, Hurley Haywood, and Ludwig Heimrath, would run in the Trans Am, but the sweeping, almost reckless way in which the rules were changed from year to year, coupled with the weak purses and the energy crisis, all combined to nearly destroy this once shining American spectacle.
The 1971 Trans Am Series was to be a runaway for Mark Donohue. Donohue and his red, white, and Sunoco blue Javelin, a car whose consumer sales volume could largely be credited to Trans Am exposure, cruised to 7 wins on the year, including 6 straight. Donohue also won his first official Drivers' Championship. With 29 wins over 5 years, Donohue remains the most successful Trans Am driver in the series history.
I've always credited myself of making him a better driver, because as I started racing with him, I could see him progressively getting better, you know. So I always thought that, in other words, we'd go out and practice and I'd set quick time for an example, and then Mark would come out and beat my time, and then I'd go back out, and I could see I was pushing him to make him a better race driver. Not that I was teaching him how to be a better race driver. He was doing that on his own, but the fact that he was having to push harder and harder. But he was very talented. He had very good equipment. He was a very good engineer, and he knew how to put it all together. And with the backing of Roger and Roger's help, I mean, they were tough.
The under 2-liter class was transformed into a new series in 1971 called the 2.5 Challenge. The Alphas, BMWs, and Datsuns ruled a series that never really caught on. The series ran for 2 years, with both titles going to Datsun with the help of John Morton. The withdrawal of the manufacturer support, low purses, inconsistency of SCCA sanctioning and personnel, and the state of the nation's economy and the automotive industry, the pony car market in particular, all joined in 1972 to put the Trans Am series on the verge of many troubled years to come. Roy Woods had purchased Roger Penske's Javelin program and hired George Follmer as his #1 driver. Follmer's 4 wins would earn him the driver's title and help AMC to another Makers' Championship. In response to the problems facing the series, SCCA made a major rules revision that allowed FIA Groups 1, 2, 3, and 4 touring and grand touring machines to run alongside SCCA sedan Class A and B cars. What had been the classic American pony car road racing series now took on a totally new look.